There are wounds that do not bleed, scars you carry in silence, memories you locked away, like old photographs hidden in a box you swore never to open. And yet, on certain nights when the world goes quiet and the hum of your thoughts grows louder, the box shakes, a whisper rises, a shadow slips through the cracks. You try to bury it deeper. You drown it with distractions. You numb it with work, with noise, with the endless scrolling of days. But the truth is this: what you have tried to forget has not forgotten you. Think of it. The arguments you replay when you're alone, the face you see in dreams you wish you didn't have, the weight in your chest that tightens without warning when a certain song, a certain smell, a certain silence brings the past rushing back like a flood. You thought you buried it, but the shadow is patient. It waits, it watches, and it whispers again and again until one day you can no longer pretend you do not hear it. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that is the quiet tragedy of our lives. We walk forward believing we have left our wounds behind, but they walk with us. They shape our choices. They warp our reflections. They sit at the table with us, unseen. Every moment of rage that seems out of nowhere. Every pattern of betrayal you find yourself trapped in. Every wall you build, brick by brick, between you and the ones who try to love you. These are not accidents. They are echoes. They are ghosts of pain you once swore you'd never face again. But here is the paradox. The healing you long for lies not in forgetting, but in remembering. Not in silencing the shadow, but in listening to it. The doorway to your wholeness is hidden inside the very wounds you swore you could not touch. Picture this with me. A child standing in a darkened room. The door is closed. The child is crying, but no one hears. Years pass. The child grows silent. They sit down in the corner, and they wait. That child is still there, inside you, inside me, inside every soul that has tried to escape pain by shutting it away. But the shadow is not here to destroy you. It is here to remind you. It is here to lead you back to what you abandoned. And if you dare to turn toward it, if you dare to open that locked room, you may find not only sorrow, but also strength. Not only grief, but also the blueprint of your becoming. Jung called this shadow work. The Stoics called it turning the obstacle into the way. Today we might call it emotional alchemy. Different names, same truth. The wound is not the end of your story. The wound is the beginning of a new one. But let me be clear, this is not an easy journey. It will break you open. It will ask you to stand before mirrors that show not only who you are, but who you have denied being. It will strip away the masks you've worn to survive. It will demand that you feel what you promised yourself you would never feel again. And yet, in that breaking, a new kind of strength is born. Not the strength of armor, but the strength of a soul that has walked naked through fire and come out carrying the flame. So I ask you now, what if the very pain you tried to forget is the compass you've been searching for? What if the shadow you fear is the key to your freedom? What if the wound you despise is the doorway into the most authentic version of yourself? Would you dare to walk through it? Stay with me, because in the next breath, we will step into that doorway together. We will open the box, we will walk into the locked room, and perhaps, in the trembling silence that follows, you will see that your shadow is not your enemy. It is your mirror, it is your guide. It is the part of you that has been waiting patiently for you to finally come home. And if this journey stirs something in you, if these words echo against a chamber you've long kept hidden, then I invite you to stay, to listen, to walk deeper into this exploration. Here, in this space, we face the shadows together. We learn to hear their language. We learn to heal through what we once tried to bury. So breathe, stay close, and ask yourself as we begin, are you ready to remember what you tried so hard to forget? There are moments in life when silence feels heavier than words. You sit in a cafe watching people pass by, their laughter spilling into the air like fragments of a world you once belonged to. You sip your coffee, you smile faintly, but inside, something is missing. Something is aching. It is in those quiet, ordinary moments that the shadow stirs. Not in dramatic lightning bolts, but in the faint, unsettling question that crawls into your mind. Why do I always feel this way? You see, the shadow rarely announces itself with thunder. It arrives in whispers, in patterns, in the subtle echoes of pain repeating through your relationships, your choices, your restless nights. Maybe it's the way you flinch at kindness, as if love itself carries danger. Maybe it's how you sabotage happiness the moment it appears too close. Maybe it's how you push people away, not because you don't crave connection, but because connection feels like exposure, and exposure feels like risk. Jung understood this paradox deeply. He wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And isn't that the truth? We run. We distract ourselves. We bury our pain beneath achievements, addictions, or endless busyness. We convince ourselves we're fine. We say, "I've moved on. I've outgrown it. That was the past." But the shadow waits. Let me tell you something raw. Every unresolved wound grows roots. Think of it like a tree planted in the soil of your unconscious. Even if you cut off its branches, even if you tell yourself you'll never think of it again, the roots dig deeper. They twist through the hidden caverns of your psyche, and one day they break the surface, sometimes in the form of anxiety, sometimes in depression, sometimes in the uncanny feeling that you are living the same painful story again and again. The shadow doesn't disappear because you ignore it. It feeds on your silence. It grows in the dark. I remember speaking once with a man who had lost his father at a young age. He told me he barely thought about it anymore. He was strong, he said. He had built a successful life. He had put it behind him. And yet, every argument with his boss felt like a war. Every time someone criticized him, he felt a burning rage he could not explain. He pushed his children to be perfect, demanding of them what no one had allowed him to be. When he finally looked inward, when he dared to touch the pain of that father-shaped absence, he realized he had been living in rebellion against a ghost. And until he faced that shadow, he was never free. This is where emotional alchemy begins. Not in denial, not in suppression, but in the quiet courage of recognition. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." To live fully, not half alive behind walls of avoidance, but fully, requires the courage to face the shadows that haunt you, because when you ignore them, they control you. When you see them, they begin to lose their power. So let me ask you something. What pain have you been carrying in silence? What memories have you buried so deeply you've almost convinced yourself they never happened? What shadow sits in the corner of your mind, waiting for the moment you are quiet enough to hear it? Pause with that for a moment. Not to analyze, not to fix. Just to acknowledge. Because acknowledgement is the first crack in the wall of denial. And once the crack appears, light begins to seep through. But here is the paradox. Facing the shadow does not always feel like light at first. It feels like entering a fog. It feels like walking into a room where mirrors are cracked, where every reflection is distorted. You see yourself, but not as you want to be seen. You see the part of you that lies, that envies, that manipulates, that hates. You see the child still aching for love. You see the adult who lashes out because they were never taught how to weep. And it is uncomfortable, it is humiliating, it is terrifying, but it is real. And reality, however painful, is always the beginning of healing. There are moments in life when silence feels heavier than words. You sit in a cafe watching people pass by, their laughter spilling into the air like fragments of a world you once belonged to. You sip your coffee, you smile faintly, but inside, something is missing. Something is aching. It is in those quiet, ordinary moments that the shadow stirs, not in dramatic lightning bolts, but in the faint, unsettling question that crawls into your mind. Why do I always feel this way? You see, the shadow rarely announces itself with thunder. It arrives in whispers, in patterns, in the subtle echoes of pain repeating through your relationships, your choices, your restless nights. Maybe it's the way you flinch at kindness, as if love itself carries danger. Maybe it's how you sabotage happiness the moment it appears too close. Maybe it's how you push people away. Not because you don't crave connection, but because connection feels like exposure, and exposure feels like risk. Jung understood this paradox deeply. He wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And isn't that the truth? We run. We distract ourselves. We bury our pain beneath achievements, addictions, or endless busyness. We convince ourselves we're fine. We say, "I've moved on. I've outgrown it. That was the past." But the shadow waits. Let me tell you something raw. Every unresolved wound grows roots. Think of it like a tree planted in the soil of your unconscious. Even if you cut off its branches, even if you tell yourself you'll never think of it again, the roots dig deeper. They twist through the hidden caverns of your psyche. And one day, they break the surface, sometimes in the form of anxiety, sometimes in depression, sometimes in the uncanny feeling that you are living the same painful story again and again. The shadow doesn't disappear because you ignore it. It feeds on your silence. It grows in the dark. I remember speaking once with a man who had lost his father at a young age. He told me he barely thought about it anymore. He was strong, he said. He had built a successful life. He had put it behind him. And yet, every argument with his boss felt like a war. Every time someone criticized him, he felt a burning rage he could not explain. He pushed his children to be perfect, demanding of them what no one had allowed him to be. When he finally looked inward, when he dared to touch the pain of that father-shaped absence, he realized he had been living in rebellion against a ghost. And until he faced that shadow, he was never free. This is where emotional alchemy begins, not in denial, not in suppression, but in the quiet courage of recognition. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." To live fully, not half alive behind walls of avoidance, but fully, requires the courage to face the shadows that haunt you. Because when you ignore them, they control you. When you see them, they begin to lose their power. So, let me ask you something. What pain have you been carrying in silence? What memories have you buried so deeply you've almost convinced yourself they never happened? What shadow sits in the corner of your mind, waiting for the moment you are quiet enough to hear it? Pause with that for a moment. Not to analyze, not to fix, just to acknowledge. Because acknowledgement is the first crack in the wall of denial. And once the crack appears, light begins to seep through. But here is the paradox. Facing the shadow does not always feel like light at first. It feels like entering a fog. It feels like walking into a room where mirrors are cracked, where every reflection is distorted. You see yourself, but not as you want to be seen. You see the part of you that lies, that envies, that manipulates, that hates. You see the child still aching for love. You see the adult who lashes out because they were never taught how to weep. And it is uncomfortable. It is humiliating. It is terrifying. But it is real. And reality, however painful, is always the beginning of healing. There is an old Jungian image that I love. He spoke of the shadow as a kind of hidden twin, the part of you that you exiled, but who has never stopped following you. You walk in the sun, pretending you are whole, but behind you your shadow stretches, sometimes larger than you, sometimes darker than you, and no matter how fast you run, you cannot outrun it. So why not turn around? Why not look it in the eye? Why not finally say, I see you? Because when you do, the shadow shifts. It becomes less a monster and more a mirror. It becomes less a curse and more a key. In therapy rooms across the world, people discover this truth every day. A woman who avoided intimacy because every touch reminded her of violation. A man who drank every night because silence reminded him of the father who never came home. A child who grew up invisible and learned that the only way to be safe was to never shine too brightly. Different stories, same shadow, same hunger for healing. And in every case, the turning point was not forgetting, but remembering. Not running, but returning. Not numbing, but feeling. So here we stand, you and I, at the threshold of memory, at the edge of the forgotten. And before we walk further, I will tell you the truth you may not want to hear. This will hurt. It will sting like salt poured into an old wound. It will ache like a muscle long atrophied, suddenly asked to move again. You will feel fragile. You will feel exposed. You will feel like breaking. But do not fear the breaking. Because sometimes it is only when the vessel cracks that the light can finally seep in. Let me leave you, for now, with this image, a mirror, fogged and fractured. You stand before it, hesitant, afraid of what it might reveal. But as you breathe, the fog begins to clear, and slowly you see not a monster staring back, but a human being. Wounded, yes, but still here. Still breathing, still alive. The healing does not begin with perfection. It begins with the willingness to look. And that is where we begin. Healing begins, not in triumph, but in the quiet collapse of pretending. Think of the times you whispered to yourself, I'm fine. You smiled, you nodded, you carried on. But underneath, your soul trembled. You felt it in the tightening of your chest, in the restless nights when sleep never came, in the sudden tears that rose for no clear reason. That was the shadow, pressing at the edges, asking to be seen. Jung spoke of it with piercing clarity. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Do you see the paradox? We chase light. We chase positivity, we chase new beginnings, but without entering the darkness, light has nowhere to take root. To heal, you must allow yourself to see the cracks. Imagine a porcelain vase, flawless on the outside but fractured within. Every day you polish it. You place it in the sun. You let others admire its beauty. But deep down, you know it is hollowed by unseen fractures. And one day, a small pressure, a passing accident, will shatter it completely. This is the soul that refuses to face its shadow. Polished, admired, but fragile, always on the edge of breaking. Now imagine another vase. Broken, yes, but mended with veins of gold. Its cracks are visible, shining with a strange kind of beauty. It is not flawless, but it is whole. This is the soul that has faced its shadow. Scarred, yes, but stronger. More radiant for the very wounds it once tried to deny. This ancient Japanese art is called kintsugi, and in a way it is the perfect symbol of emotional alchemy. Your cracks are not shame. Your cracks are where the healing light enters. But how do we get there? How do we move from fractures we hide to cracks we honor? It begins with the first mirror crack. That moment in life when something breaks through the wall you built and you can no longer escape the truth. Maybe it was heartbreak that left you gasping. Maybe it was betrayal by someone you trusted. Maybe it was grief that stripped the world of its color. Whatever it was, it forced you to confront the raw wound beneath the armor. It tore open the box you had sealed. It held your shadow up before you, like a mirror you could no longer look away from. I remember speaking with a woman who had been abandoned by her partner after 10 years. At first, she hardened. She told herself she didn't care. She told everyone she was stronger for it. But late at night, she would sit by the window, staring into the dark, feeling the old childhood ache of being left behind. For weeks, she refused to feel it. She drowned herself in work. She smiled through conversations. But the shadow grew louder. Until one night, in the quiet, she broke. Tears came like a storm. Memories she had buried since childhood rose like ghosts. The night her father left. The years of waiting by the door for someone who never returned. Her grief in the present was not only about a partner leaving, it was about the child within her who had been abandoned long ago. That night was her first mirror crack, painful, unbearable, and yet the beginning of her healing. This is how the shadow works. It does not appear randomly. It appears when life touches the old wound, when the present becomes a mirror of the past. That is why the same patterns repeat. That is why the same heartbreak seems to circle back, the same conflicts, the same loneliness again and again. It is not the universe punishing you. It is your shadow calling you home. The Stoics, too, understood this strange gift of pain. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. What you resist is not merely an obstacle, it is a teacher. What hurts you is also what can heal you, if you dare to look." Think of your life as a hallway of mirrors. Each mirror reflects not only your face, but the hidden face of your shadow. In one mirror you see anger, but behind it, a deep fear of being powerless. In another you see jealousy, but behind it a wound of feeling invisible. In another you see pride, but behind it the child who never felt enough. Every mirror crack is an invitation to see beyond the surface, to ask, what is this really about? What old wound is this moment touching? And when you dare to ask, the shadow begins to speak. But let me warn you, the first mirror crack is destabilizing. It shakes the story you've told yourself. It leaves you raw. You may feel shame. You may feel rage. You may want to slam the mirror shut again, to bury it deeper, to go back to the polished porcelain of denial. But if you resist the temptation to run, if you can hold your gaze, if you can breathe through the shattering, then the healing begins. Because you cannot mend what you will not touch. You cannot integrate what you will not see. Take a breath here. Let these words sink in. This is not philosophy for the mind alone. This is a journey for the heart. So ask yourself gently, where has life cracked your mirror? What event, what relationship, what loss has forced you to feel something you tried to forget? Do not rush for answers. Simply hold the question, because in the holding your unconscious begins to stir. The roots begin to surface. The shadow begins to reveal its face. There is no need to rush. Healing is not a sprint. It is a slow unfolding, like the blooming of a flower in the dark. At first, you see only shadow. But if you stay, if you breathe, petal by petal, something begins to open. And you realize the pain you feared was not endless. It was a doorway. And on the other side of it waits a version of you have not yet met. This is where we are now, at the first crack, at the trembling threshold, and soon we will walk deeper, We will begin to listen to the shadow's voice, to hear its strange, haunting wisdom. Because what you fear most is often what you most need to hear. But for now, pause with me. Picture that fractured mirror again. Your reflection split into pieces, distorted, unfamiliar, and yet, if you look closely, you will see something stirring beneath the shards. Not destruction, but the beginning of truth. The first glimmer of becoming whole. The shadow's language is not spoken in words. It speaks in symbols, in dreams that unsettle you, in patterns that repeat when you least expect them, in the strange magnetism of people who wound you the same way others once did. It speaks in silence too, in the tightness of your chest, in the restless hunger that nothing seems to satisfy, in the heaviness that lingers even on days when everything looks fine on the outside. And until you learn to hear that language, you will think the shadow is chaos. But it is not chaos. It is communication. Let me tell you a story of a man I once knew. All his life he feared rejection. He avoided love, avoided intimacy, avoided showing too much of himself. He said it was because he preferred independence. But in truth, it was because his earliest memory was of being told, "You're too much." The words stayed, not in his conscious mind, but in his bones. So every time someone drew close, the shadow whispered, "They will leave. You are too much." And without realizing it, he would pull away first. He thought he was protecting himself, but what he was really doing was reliving the wound again and again. This is how the shadow traps us. It does not chain us with iron. It chains us with memory. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Pain is the threshold. Pain is the key that unlocks the unconscious. Pain is the shadow's way of saying, "Look here. This is where you are still bleeding." It is never random. The pain you carry today has roots, roots that reach backward into forgotten soil, and the moment you allow yourself to follow them, you find the child within you who first felt the wound. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture yourself as you are now, and then picture the child you once were, small, innocent, unaware of how heavy the world could be. See their eyes, see their fear, see the way they looked to the adults for safety, for love, for acceptance. Now, ask yourself, what moment broke them? What moment left them sitting in the dark, waiting for someone who never came? It might not come as a clear memory. Sometimes it comes as a feeling, a heaviness, a flash of shame, a wave of grief. That is the shadow leading you back to your forgotten self. Many people recoil here. They say, "But I don't want to go back. What's done is done. The past is gone." And yes, the past is gone, but the imprint is not. The child is still inside you, and they do not need the past to change. They need you to return. They need you to see them. They need you to feel what they could not. Because what you do not feel, you pass on. To your relationships, to your children, to the people you love most. The cycle repeats until someone has the courage to turn around, to face the shadow, to say it ends with me. Think of humanity itself as a river. Every trauma, every wound, every unspoken grief flows downstream, generation after generation. But when you face your shadow, when you choose to heal what you once tried to forget, you become a dam. You stop the flood. You change the river's course. Your healing is not only for you, it is for those who came before you and for those who will come after. That is why the work matters. That is why your pain matters. Not because suffering is noble, but because transformation is possible. And yet, healing is not a straight line. It is a spiral. You think you've moved past it. Then one day, a smell, a word, a look, and suddenly the old wound is alive again. You feel like you're back at the beginning, but you're not. Every return to the pain is a deeper descent. Every spiral takes you closer to the root. Every revisit offers a chance to bring more awareness, more compassion, more integration. Do not despise the spiral. It is the path of alchemy. The alchemists believed that gold was hidden inside lead, that through fire transformation could occur. What they did not always say plainly was this: the gold they sought was not in metals, but in the soul. Your shadow is the lead, heavy, dark, seemingly worthless. But when you bring it to the fire of awareness, when you dare to hold it instead of deny it, something changes. The lead begins to turn, slowly, painfully, but inevitably. And what emerges is gold, not the gold of wealth, but the gold of wholeness, the gold of a self no longer split, but integrated. So here you are, standing at the edge of your shadow. The first cracks have appeared. The mirror has shown you glimpses of what lies beneath, and you may feel fear. You may feel resistance. You may hear the voice within that says, "Not now, not yet. It's too much." That voice is part of the shadow too. It is the echo of survival. It is the child who learned that feeling was dangerous, that remembering was unbearable. But you are not that child anymore. You are here. You are breathing. You are capable of holding more than you think. The shadow will not consume you. It will complete you. Let me end this first part with a paradox. You cannot truly heal until you face the pain you tried to forget. But the moment you face it, you realize something extraordinary. It was never here to destroy you. It was here to transform you. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the doorway. And what waits beyond that doorway is not despair, but the possibility of becoming whole. Take a slow breath. Let these words echo. Because in part 2, we will walk deeper into that doorway. We will step into the spiral. We will explore the archetypes and patterns that shape your hidden wounds. We will see the faces of the shadow more clearly. And perhaps, in seeing them, you will begin to see yourself. Not as broken, but as unfinished. Not as ruined, but as becoming. Have you ever wondered why someone who once admired you suddenly turns cold? Why their smile fades into silence? Why their praise hardens into subtle dismissal? Why the warmth in their eyes is replaced with something darker, something close to contempt? This shift rarely comes from anything you did in the physical world. More often, it arises from something you awakened inside of them. And that, my friend, is far more dangerous. Carl Jung once wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But the reverse is also true. Everything that inspires awe in us about others can awaken the deepest shadows we've buried. The mirror effect. When you step into your strength, when you embody a quality others have disowned in themselves, you become a mirror. And not the kind of mirror people want to look into. Imagine someone who has spent their whole life denying their voice, swallowing words, and compromising truth. Then suddenly, they meet you. You speak with clarity. You move with conviction. You do not bend to please. At first, they admire you. They feel drawn to your certainty like a moth to flame. But very soon, admiration mutates. Why? Because in seeing your strength, they are confronted with their own weakness. In watching your courage, they feel the weight of their own silence. And hatred is often nothing more than the rage of a soul forced to look at the part of itself it abandoned. This is why light breeds shadow, the mathematics of projection. Jung called it projection. The psyche, unable to hold its repressed material, throws it outward. But projection is not neutral, it is laced with venom. When someone looks at you and suddenly hates you, they are often not seeing you at all. They are seeing a distorted version of themselves, They are staring at a wound they buried years ago, now animated in your presence. For example, a person who buried their ambition may despise your success. A person who silenced their creativity may mock your art. A person who denied their own beauty may sneer at your presence. It has little to do with you. You are simply the carrier of their unlived life. This is why Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But until others confront their unconscious, you become their fate. The narcissism of small differences. Here lies a paradox. Sometimes, the hatred does not come from those vastly different than you, but from those almost the same. Freud called this the narcissism of small differences. Your light threatens most not the stranger, but the near equal. Someone who walks a similar path but stopped halfway. Someone who once dreamed as you dreamed, but gave up. Your existence is living proof that surrender was not the only option, that their excuses are not destiny, that their compromise was not necessary, and this breeds a unique kind of bitterness, not the hatred of the distant, but the betrayal of the familiar. They may whisper behind your back, they may smile while secretly resenting you, they may even disguise their hatred as concern or advice. But underneath lies the same wound, the terror of seeing what they might have been had they not abandoned themselves. Why the brightest souls attract the darkest shadows. It is no accident that prophets are stoned, that innovators are ridiculed, that visionaries are betrayed by their closest companions. The brightest souls awaken the heaviest shadows in others. To shine is to expose, and to expose is to threaten. Consider Jesus, Socrates, Giordano Bruno, men who bore light so unbearable to their contemporaries that death seemed the only way to silence them. Their very existence destabilized the fragile lies people clung to. When you carry light, you do not only attract those who love it, you also awaken those who cannot bear it. Hatred, then, becomes a strange form of acknowledgement, a recognition of power, a confession hidden in rage. You are what I could not be, the hidden economy of hatred. Here is the strange truth. Hatred is not free. It is a psychic tax, an energy investment. To hate someone requires attention, imagination, even obsession. So why would someone give you that much energy? Because unconsciously they are still bound to you. Their hatred is a tether. You occupy their mind precisely because you embody the part of themselves they abandoned. This is why many haters cannot stop watching you. They track your movements, study your words, and even imitate you in distorted ways. Their hatred is a mirror they cannot turn away from. And here lies a subtle but dangerous trap. The more you react to their hatred, the more energy you feed it. Hatred survives on your attention. It is a parasite. The only way to starve it is not to match it, not to shrink before it, but to transcend it, to keep living your light regardless of the shadows it awakens. The wounded child behind the hatred. If you look closely, beneath the sneer, beneath the sarcasm, beneath the venom, you will almost always find a wound. A child denied love, a dream ridiculed, a voice silenced. Hatred is rarely born in adulthood. It is carried from earlier scars, grafted onto new faces. You simply become the trigger. The wound already existed. This does not mean you must excuse the hatred. It does not mean you must embrace the person. But understanding it gives you power. For when you realize their hatred is not truly about you, you are free. The Stoics called this the discipline of perception. To see clearly, without being deceived by appearances. To recognize that the insult, the jealousy, the rejection are not arrows meant for your soul, but echoes of their own suffering. The choice before you. When faced with this sudden hatred, you stand at a crossroads. One path. You shrink. You dim your light. You twist yourself into smaller shapes so that others do not feel threatened. You betray your essence in exchange for temporary peace. The other path, you hold steady. You allow their hatred to exist without letting it define you. You refuse to become their shadow. The Stoics, again, offer guidance. Epictetus reminds us, when someone is stirred against you, remember, it is not what you are that disturbs them, but their judgment about what you are. You cannot control their judgment, but you can control your stance. And here lies the paradox of light. The more hatred it awakens, the more proof it carries of its necessity. So, the next time someone turns cold, the next time a friend becomes distant, the next time you feel the sting of sudden contempt, ask not, "What did I do wrong?" Instead ask, "What wound in them did my existence awaken?" For the answer to that question will tell you far more about their hatred and far more about your light. But this is where Jung becomes dangerous, because the moment you recognize this, the entire morality of human attachment begins to fracture. If relationships are contracts, then love itself is not an accident. It is an arrangement. It is the soul's negotiation with the unconscious. The Greeks told us long ago every bond is a covenant. Even betrayal carries the ink of destiny. Think of Judas and Christ. Was it only treachery? Or was it a necessary contract signed in the language of fate so that one man could fulfill his mission through another's shadow? Now, apply this lens to your own life. That person you could not keep, the one who came in like a storm, rearranged your spirit and then vanished. Ask yourself, what contract was signed? Because if you mistake them for a failure, you miss the truth. If you call it only heartbreak, you reduce it to chance. But if you recognize the contract, you see something more, the pattern of your individuation. Contracts of the soul often come disguised as disasters. The lover who awakens your deepest vulnerability, then leaves you gasping for air. The friend who knows you at a level so raw it terrifies you, and then withdraws. The teacher who shows up in your darkest night and lights a fire in you, only to disappear before you are ready. This is not abandonment, it is initiation. Jung said the psyche is not built by comfort, but by conflict, by the tension of opposites. So the contract is rarely gentle. It does not arrive in silk and harmony. It arrives as fire and absence, as collision and departure. And in that wound, the soul bends toward growth. But let us go deeper. What does the contract demand from you? It is not about the other person. It is not about why they left. It is about the truth they unlocked in you, the truth that could only be revealed through their presence and sealed through their absence. This is why the universe sends you someone you cannot keep. Because if you could keep them, you would cling to them. You would mistake the person for the lesson. You would make them your prison instead of your passage. The real contract is this. They do not belong to you. They belong to your becoming. So here lies the paradox. To love deeply, but not possess. To lose painfully, but not despair. To let go, but not forget. For forgetting is the breaking of the contract. Remembering is its fulfillment. And so the ones we cannot keep remain. Not in our hands, but in our bones. Not in our days, but in our nights. They become myth inside us. They become scripture etched not on paper, but on the architecture of our soul. Loss is a furnace. It burns you, reshapes you, refines you into something unrecognizable from who you once were. Most people run from it. They numb it, drown it, distract themselves from it. But Jung warned, what you resist persists. And so the pain you refuse to face becomes the shadow that stalks you for decades. But if you turn toward it, if you enter the fire willingly, something extraordinary happens. The grief that threatens to destroy you becomes the very material that transforms you. This is the alchemy of loss, turning the lead of despair into the gold of meaning. Think of your greatest heartbreak. You were certain it would kill you. You walked the streets like a ghost, every corner haunted by their absence. You searched their face in strangers. You heard their voice in silence. The world looked the same, but it had lost its warmth, its pulse, its color. And yet, look at you now. Somehow you survived. Somehow the ache that once felt unbearable became a scar, and the scar became a teacher. It carved humility into your pride. It burned away illusions about control. It stripped you down to something raw and real. This is the paradox. Loss diminishes you, yet it also enlarges you. It takes away what you thought you needed, and in doing so, reveals what you truly need. It forces you to rebuild, not from the comfort of fantasy, but from the bedrock of reality. Why is this important? Because when the universe sends someone you cannot keep, it is not only about the beauty of what you had, it is about the transformation that follows when it is gone. The loss is not an accident. It is alchemical. It is a crucible designed to destroy the false layers of yourself, your dependence, your illusions, your idealizations, and to reveal the core that cannot be broken. Jung believed the psyche organizes itself through symbols. Loss is one of the most powerful symbols because it forces you into a confrontation with death while you are still alive. When someone leaves, the world ends for you, yet life continues. And in that unbearable contradiction, you awaken. You discover you are larger than your grief. You discover you can hold death and still choose life. This is the secret the ancients knew. In myth, the hero always loses something, often someone, before they can claim wisdom. Orpheus loses Eurydice, Gilgamesh loses Enkidu. Even Christ loses his disciples to doubt before he is left utterly alone on the cross. The soul does not evolve through possession, it evolves through surrender. It evolves through losing what you love and then carrying that loss as sacred fire. That person you could not keep. They are not gone. They live in you as energy transformed. Their absence is presence in another form. Their silence is a voice you now carry within. Every tear you shed was not wasted. It was baptism into your next self. This is why Jung said, "We do not solve our suffering, we outgrow it." Loss is not something to escape. It is something to metabolize, to digest, to integrate until it becomes fuel for the journey ahead. So when you ask, why did the universe send me someone I could not keep? The answer may be brutal, because you needed to lose them to find yourself. The tragedy of being human is that we learn the deepest truths only through fracture. We don't awaken because life is smooth. We awaken because life tears something out of us. That is why the people you cannot keep are so pivotal. They are not just chapters in your life story, they are initiations. Every initiation requires blood. Not literal blood, but the blood of identity. The version of yourself that must die for a greater self to emerge. When you lose someone you cannot imagine living without, you are forced to face the collapse of that old identity. The one who was defined by them. The one who believed in permanence. The one who confused love with possession. And when that self dies, the shadow surges. The shadow of abandonment, of worthlessness, of rage. It comes roaring out like a storm, and you fear it will consume you. But here is the paradox. The shadow does not appear to destroy you. It appears to be integrated. It is the unloved part of you finally demanding recognition. Jung's work teaches that we carry within us not only what we consciously show, but also all that we have disowned. Loss brings these exiled parts to the surface. The child in you who felt unworthy of love, the warrior in you who felt powerless, the lover in you who feared intimacy would end in betrayal. These voices echo in the emptiness left behind, and you cannot ignore them anymore. The mistake many make is to try to replace the lost person immediately. They rush into distraction, into new lovers, into new projects, into anything that spares them from silence. But silence is the medicine. Emptiness is the initiation. If you can bear to sit in the ruins long enough, the ruins begin to whisper. They tell you not only who you lost, but who you are becoming. This is the alchemy. Pain plus presence, transformation. Not pain alone. That only breaks you. Not presence without pain. That only comforts you. But pain held with full awareness, that is what forges the soul. Think of the blacksmith. Metal is worthless until it is hammered by fire. The hammering is violent, brutal. But without it, the sword would never emerge. Loss is the hammer. Your presence is the fire. Together, they shape you into something sharper, truer, more indestructible than before. And yet, this transformation is not automatic. Some people are destroyed by loss. They become bitter, cynical, permanently closed. Why? Because they resist the process. They cling to what was, instead of surrendering to what is becoming. They build a shrine to the past and worship their pain instead of using it as fuel. But you are listening to this. You are not here by accident. Part of you knows that this loss is not a punishment. It is a passage. The person you could not keep. They were the spark. The fire they lit in you was not meant to remain in them. It was meant to ignite you. Their departure does not mean the fire is gone. It means the fire has moved from outside of you into you. And now you must decide, do you let it burn you hollow, or do you let it burn you alive? This is where Stoicism and Jung meet. The Stoics remind us, nothing belongs to us, not even those we love. Everything is borrowed, everything is fragile. To cling is to suffer. To love without clinging is to be free. Jung reminds us, what you lose externally, you must reclaim internally. The person you could not keep is now an archetype, a living image in your psyche. They are gone in body, but eternal in symbol. This is the strange gift of loss. It makes you immortalize the one who left, not in a way that chains you to grief, but in a way that deepens your soul. They become your inner guide, even as their outer presence disappears. So when you remember them, don't only remember the pain. Remember what they awakened in you. That is the true contract. Not that they would stay forever, but that they would awaken something eternal within you. There comes a moment, always later than you expect, when the grief softens. Not because you forget, but because something inside you has shifted. The wound that once bled now begins to breathe. You realize that the pain has not vanished, it has transfigured. Loss is never erased, it is transmuted. It becomes a scar, and scars are paradoxical things. They remind you of suffering, but they also remind you that you survived. The scar is not weakness, it is memory etched into flesh, proof that you were strong enough to be broken and strong enough to mend. And if you listen carefully, the scar begins to speak. It tells you that the person you could not keep was not taken from you. They were given to you. Given for a time, for a purpose, for a lesson. The contract was never about possession. It was always about transformation. This is the alchemy of loss. The one who left becomes the one who lives inside you. The absence becomes presence. The ending becomes beginning. The Stoics remind us, you lose only what was never truly yours. The Jungian path reminds us, what you integrate, you never lose. Hold these two truths together, and the paradox of love becomes clear. Love is not about keeping. Love is about becoming. The ones you lose press against you until they shape the deepest contours of your soul. They are not gone. They are inward. And maybe, this is the secret, what you loved most in them was never them alone. It was the reflection of your own unlived potential, mirrored back to you. The The tenderness, the fire, the courage, the wildness, they were qualities in you seeking recognition. The person you could not keep was simply the mirror. The mirror shatters, but the image remains. Now you must live it. This is why the universe sends you someone you cannot keep, because to keep them would have been too easy. You would have mistaken their light for your own. But to lose them, that forces you to find the light within yourself. The grief, the emptiness, the ache, they are signals. Not that something is missing from you, but that something is waiting to be born. A new identity, a new depth, a new power. So sit with your loss. Do not rush it, do not bury it, do not try to outrun it. Instead, let it carve you open. Let it hollow you out, because only when you are hollow can the new light pour in. And when that light comes, it won't feel like the old warmth. It will feel steadier, deeper, quieter. Not the fire of another, but the eternal flame within. In this way, loss becomes initiation, the contract fulfilled, the alchemy complete. The person you could not keep has already done their work, and now it is your turn. Your turn to live the lesson. Your turn to embody the light. Your turn to become what their absence has demanded. That is the gift. That is the pain. That is the paradox. And if you can hold it long enough, one day you will whisper to yourself, not in bitterness, not in longing, but in gratitude. They were never mine to keep. They were mine to awaken me. There comes a night when the silence feels different. Not heavy, not suffocating, but spacious. You notice it almost by accident, an exhale you didn't know you were holding, a sudden stillness in the storm of thought. It is then you realize the grief has not disappeared, but it no longer owns you. This is the first sign of rebirth. It never arrives with fanfare. It comes quietly, like a dawn you only notice after it has already colored the sky. The Stoics called this moment apatheia, a state beyond disturbance, not because you are numb, but because you have accepted reality fully. Jung would call it individuation, the soul's slow awakening to its true shape, forged in the furnace of pain. Two languages for the same truth. The self is born when illusion dies. What illusion? The illusion that you can possess another soul. The illusion that permanence is promised. The illusion that love means keeping rather than becoming. When those illusions collapse, the ego trembles. It resists. It claws to rebuild its cage. But if you endure long enough, a strange freedom appears. You are lighter. Not because you lost nothing, but because you no longer carry what was never yours. And in that emptiness, something begins to grow. At first, it is fragile, like a seed cracking through stone. You hear a whisper in the marrow of your being. Live what they awakened in you. That is the soul's rebirth. It is not about forgetting them. It is about honoring them by embodying the light they mirrored. If they showed you tenderness, become tenderness. If they showed you courage, live courage. If they showed you passion, burn with that same fire. They were the messenger. You are the message in motion. But beware, rebirth is not a single moment. It is a cycle. You will feel strong one day and shattered the next. You will wonder if you've healed, only to find yourself crying at the sound of their name. Do not mistake this for failure. Healing is not a staircase. It is a spiral. You return to the same pain, but each time from a higher vantage. Each time the wound teaches you something new. The ancients knew this. That is why every myth of rebirth carries suffering. Osiris dismembered, only to rise. Dionysus torn apart, only to return. Christ crucified, only to resurrect. The soul's rebirth is always preceded by rupture. The breaking is not the end, it is the passage. And so, if you are standing in the ruins of a love you could not keep, know this: you are already being remade. Your tears are not weakness, they are baptism. Your loneliness is not punishment, it is initiation. Your scar is not disfigurement, it is the mark of transformation. One day you will look back at the very moment that nearly destroyed you and realize this was the birthplace of my true self. Because the soul that emerges after such loss is not the same soul that entered it. It is deeper, it is wider. It is capable of holding both the fire of love and the shadow of loss without shattering. This is the paradox. You lose someone you cannot keep, only to discover the self you were always meant to become. The final stage is not forgetting. It is remembering differently. At first, their memory pierced you like a blade, sharp, unbearable, relentless. But over time, the same memory softens. It becomes less of a wound and more of a lantern. You carry it not as pain, but as light. This is when you know the soul's contract has fulfilled itself. They were never meant to stay because permanence was not the gift. The gift was awakening, and awakening, once given, cannot be taken away. Here lies the hardest truth. The universe never sends you someone you can't keep out of cruelty. It does so out of mercy. Because if they had stayed, you might never have grown. You would have clung to comfort instead of stepping into transformation. The universe is ruthless in this way. It cares less for your temporary happiness and more for your eternal becoming. It would rather break your heart than let your soul sleep. And so what feels like loss is actually the universe's most brutal form of love. It takes away what you thought you needed, so you may discover what you truly are. This is why the Stoics said, "Do not wish for events to happen as you desire, but desire them as they happen, and you will find peace." And why Jung whispered, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Two voices, centuries apart, both pointing to the same horizon. You are not here to keep what you love. You are here to become love itself. And perhaps this is the highest form of gratitude you can give to the one you lost. Not endless mourning, not self-destruction, not clinging to ghosts, but living the life they unlocked within you. To walk with courage, to love with depth, to create with fire, to endure with dignity. In this way, they never truly leave. They live on in the shape you become. Every act of kindness, every risk you take, every boundary you honor, every truth you dare to speak, they echo in it. This is the paradox of the soul contract. They were not yours to keep, but they were yours to transform you. And you were not theirs to own, but theirs to awaken. So tonight, if you are still holding the ashes of what was, let them fall. Stand in the empty space they leave behind. Breathe into it. Do not fear the silence. It is not absence, it is foundation. And when the dawn comes, walk forward, not as the broken one, not as the abandoned one, but as the reborn one. Because the soul that has been to the underworld of grief and returned, that soul carries a strength unshakable by time, a tenderness uncorrupted by pain, a wisdom that burns brighter than any loss. This is your inheritance. This is your rebirth. And though you could not keep them, the truth they carved into you will keep you forever.